The release of Jeffrey Epstein's emails and their mention of Donald Trump knowing about the sex offender and young girls is mounting pressure on the US president as his press secretary dutifully deflects the implied accusations. Calls to release the whole dossier grow. Emerald Maxwell with this.
I didn't want anything to do with
Donald Trump has repeatedly denied any knowledge of the sex trafficking activities of his former friend Jeffrey Epstein. But the disgraced financier's emails released Wednesday appear to cast doubt on that. One exchange suggests that Epstein may have spent Thanksgiving 2017 with Trump, his first after being elected president. It was also 13 years after Trump has said their friendship ended, and 9 years after a grand jury indicted Epstein for soliciting prostitution from a minor in Florida, which resulted in his registration as a sex offender. In the more than 20,000 pages of emails to associates, Epstein also repeatedly insults Trump and hints that he has damaging information on him. In one email, Epstein alleges an unnamed victim spent hours at his house with Trump. And in another, Epstein says of course Trump knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. Trump accused the Democrats of releasing selective emails in order to deflect from their own failings. Democrats are now a step closer to compelling the full publication of the Epstein case files after the Speaker of the House said he would bring the bill to a floor vote next week.
As soon as possible. It'll be on the suspension calendar, and I think it'll pass overwhelmingly.
The petition to force a vote passed when a new Democratic congresswoman signed immediately after being sworn in.
The Epstein files discharge petition sat one signature short. With my signing, we move one step closer to the truth.
4 Republicans also added their names, despite Trump's urging of them not to fall into a Democrat trap. Top officials even hosted hard-right Republican Lauren Boebert in the White House Situation Room to push her to keep her name off the petition, but she refused to back down.
Emerald's report sets up Fraser Jackson, who's waiting for us live in Washington for more. Fraser, a very good evening to you. Another day, more revelations. Tell us more about the latest.
Yeah, the more revelations coming out of that wider tranche of 23,000 documents that the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee released in response to those 3 emails that the Democrats released. And they contained some tidbits and gave a window into the convicted sex offender and his thoughts on and relationship with Donald Trump. In some correspondence, Epstein painted himself as a Trump insider who could leverage potentially damaging information about the president and his businesses. Epstein emailed a former Prime Minister of Norway ahead of Trump's 2018 bilateral meeting with Vladimir Putin, offering an insight into Trump. In that email, he says, "I think you might suggest to Putin that Lavrov can get insight on talking to me." Epstein continuing to suggest that he'd already discussed Trump with Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vitaly Shurkin, before his death in 2017. In another exchange of emails, Epstein at one point says that he is, quote, the one able to take him down, talking about Donald Trump. In an email to a former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summer, Epstein said, quote, "I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body, so yes, dangerous." To another associate, Epstein said, quote, "Donald is close to no one. He talks to many people. He tells each one something different." And then a couple of years later, in 2015, a former New York Times reporter was talking to Epstein about juicy gossip on Epstein and Trump and their relationship. And during that exchange, Epstein asked him, quote, "Would you like photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen?" The reporter says that Epstein never sent those photos, and it's not clear whether that was a sincere question or not from Epstein, but he continued to ask the reporter, "Ask my housemate about Donald almost walking through the door, leaving his nose print on the glass, as young women were swimming in the pool, and he was so focused that he walked straight into the door." So whether these emails are true or not, of course, this is only a one-sided email chain from Jeffrey Epstein and his associates, but it is certainly creating a headache for the White House, and it's a headache that they're trying to play down.
Indeed, it's something legally that could be battered away perhaps as hearsay. However, nonetheless, for a certain base that has voted for Donald Trump, this is the kind of thing that they won't be impressed by, I think it's fair to say. Is there any chance, Fraser, that the entire Epstein dossier will ever see the light of day? What do you think?
Well, the next steps on this now is that this is going to go to a vote in the House next week, as Mike Johnson said. We were actually expecting it to be after Thanksgiving, so the fact that it's next week is a lot sooner than we expected. And it's interesting to note that quite a few Republicans who didn't sign the petition to get that vote onto the floor are now saying that they're going to vote with that petition because, they say that they're doing the right thing and doing what needs to be done in the name of transparency. I think for a lot of Democrats, they want this vote, even if it's going to be a non-starter when it gets to the Senate and especially onto Donald Trump's desk, which would have to happen in order to release it. The Democrats just want to have this vote so they can get people's name on the record as to where they stand on this. And of course, this has been like a nuclear football, a political football for a lot of people on Capitol Hill and indeed the presidency. So this vote might get through the House. It's not likely to get through the Senate, and it is extremely unlikely to get signed by Donald Trump. But I think by that point, the damage might already have been done.
Fraser Jackson, as always, thank you very much indeed. Fraser Jackson, our correspondent there in Washington.